Senator Elizabeth Warren is campaigning tonight in Virginia, which will award 99 delegates in its primary on Super Tuesday, March 3rd, when 14 states will be voting. Senator Warren is currently third in the delegate total. The presidential campaign swerved into one of Elizabeth Warren's areas of expertise today as a former Harvard Law professor specializing in bankruptcy law and the person who created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in President Barack Obama's administration. New York City's former Republican mayor, Michael Bloomberg, who is now running for president as a Democrat, has been forced to answer for statements that he has made in the past, including this statement in 2008, in which he explained the collapse of the housing market that left millions of homeowners around the country drowning in mortgages on homes that had lost their value.
Redlining, if you remember, was the term where banks took whole neighborhoods and said, people in these neighborhoods are poor, they're not going to be able to pay off their mortgages, tell them your salesmen don't go into those areas. And then Congress got involved, as local elected officials as well, and said, oh, that's not fair, these people should be able to get credit. And once you started pushing in that direction, banks started making more and more loans where the credit of the person buying the house wasn't as good as you would like.
Joining us now from Arlington, Virginia, is Massachusetts Senator and Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren. Senator Warren, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I want to get your reaction to what Mike Bloomberg just said there about the history of redlining.
Right. What the mayor is really saying is that this crisis could have been averted if the banks had just been able to discriminate against black and brown people more. Let's be clear. That would not have averted the crisis, and anybody who thinks that the banks should have been allowed to be more racist should not be the leader of our party.
Let me read to you what a Bloomberg campaign spokesperson has said about this specifically. This is what their statement says. Mike's saying that something bad, the financial crisis, followed something good, which is the fight against redlining he was part of as mayor, and Mike has detailed plans for how he will help 1 million more black families buy a house and counteract the effects of redlining and the subprime mortgage crisis as president. Your reaction to that, Senator?
He can try to scrub that video. He can try to scrub that video any way he wants. But it clearly says that, redlining was what helped protect the banks so the banks could make bigger profits. Look, let me tell you how I see this problem. This is the problem of a billionaire who thinks the way he's going to be elected is he's just going to go buy an election. I think the way that the Democrats ought to be picking their candidate is they ought to be doing it through the grassroots. And I think funding is a big part of this. When you can just reach in your own pocket and throw a few $100 million on the table and start buying your way to a nomination, it's a kind of different perspective than if you're doing it from the grassroots up. I believe in grassroots funding, and anybody who's listening to this who thinks that's how we ought to be funding campaigns, I hope they go to elizabethwarren.com and just pitch in $5 to say that is the way that we should make our campaigns run. Be part of this. Volunteer. Volunteer an hour of phone banking. Go to a place near you. We're in 31 states now. But really, this is about democracy hanging in the balance. Are we going to be a country that you got to either be a billionaire or go suck up to the billionaires? Or are we going to be a country where we really do make our democracy work again and we fund these campaigns from the grassroots up? That's where I am.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.